Imagine being laughed at in a language you don't even speak, right to your face. That's what happened to a waitress in Dubai until she revealed a secret that left a billionaire humiliated in front of everyone. The mocking billionaire. Can you imagine being laughed at in a language you don't even understand? That was the reality for a young black waitress on one unforgettable evening in downtown Dubai. The restaurant was no ordinary place. It was one of those five-star establishments that only the rich and powerful could afford to enter. Polished marble floors reflected the glow of golden chandeliers. The air was filled with the rich aroma of saffron, truffle oil, and freshly grilled seafood flown in from distant oceans. Outside, exotic cars lined up in the valet. Rolls-Royces, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, each one shining like a jewel under the night lights. Inside, wealthy guests mingled, laughing over glasses of imported wine, their conversations echoing with confidence and privilege. For the customers, it was a night of pleasure. For the staff, it was another long night of keeping smiles on their faces, no matter how difficult the guests could be. Among the many waiters and waitresses rushing between tables, there was one young woman. She wore the same black and white uniform as the others, yet she stood out not because of what she wore, but because of her quiet grace. Her name didn't matter to most guests, but to her colleagues. She was known as someone hardworking, polite, and never easily shaken. But that night, she was about to face something that would test her patience like never before. At the center of the dining hall sat a table that demanded attention. A group of men had gathered there, their expensive watches glimmering with each movement, their conversation loud enough to overpower the soft music playing in the background. They were led by one man, a billionaire. This man wasn't famous for generosity or kindness, no. His reputation was built on arrogance. People admired his money, his properties. His luxury lifestyle splashed across social media, but those who worked near him often spoke in hushed voices about his cruelty. He was the kind of man who enjoyed feeling superior, and he made sure everyone around him knew it. He leaned back comfortably in his chair, wearing a suit tailored to perfection. Diamond cufflinks caught the light each time he raised his hand. His friends hung on his every word, laughing loudly at his jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. To him, the world was a stage, and everyone else existed only to play supporting roles in his performance. When the waitress approached his table, she did so with the same polite professionalism she gave every guest. She held her notepad, pen ready, and greeted the group with a warm smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. May I take your order?" The billionaire gave her a glance, quick, dismissive, almost as if she wasn't even human, just part of the furniture. For a brief moment, she hoped he would simply state what he wanted to eat and allow her to move on, but instead he smirked. Leaning closer to his companions, he whispered something in Arabic. The words flowed smoothly off his tongue, fast and sharp like knives hidden behind a smile. The effect was immediate. His entire table erupted in laughter. Some tried to stifle it behind their hands, while others didn't bother to hide their amusement at all. Heads tilted back, shoulders shook, and the billionaire himself chuckled with deep satisfaction, clearly proud of what he had said. The waitress stood still, her smile frozen in place. She didn't know exactly what was said, but she didn't need to. She could feel it in her gut. It was about her. She was the joke. In that moment, the dining hall felt different to her. The chandeliers above suddenly seemed too bright, exposing her to every stare. The air around her felt heavy, as if each laugh at that table pressed against her chest. She forced herself to keep her posture straight. She kept the polite smile that years of training had taught her to maintain. But inside, her heart sank. Questions spun in her mind. What did they say? Was it my skin, my job, my voice? She looked around briefly, as if hoping someone else might notice what just happened. But the other tables were busy with their own meals, their own conversations. To them, she was invisible, just a worker in uniform. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment. He looked at her again, this time with a sly grin, as though daring her to ask what he had said. His friends kept glancing between him and her, waiting to see her reaction, feeding off his arrogance like moths to a flame. But she didn't give him the satisfaction. With steady hands, she lifted her pen slightly and asked again in a calm tone, "Shall I take your order now, sir?" Her voice was even, but inside a storm was brewing. She was used to difficult customers, impatient ones, demanding ones, even rude ones. but being openly mocked, in a language she supposedly couldn't understand, cut deeper than anything else. She turned slightly so they wouldn't see her eyes, blinking quickly to keep the tears from forming. In her heart, she promised herself something. They may think I don't understand. They may believe their words are hidden behind a language barrier. But one day somehow, they will realize this is not a woman you can laugh at so easily. And that was the beginning of a moment none of them would ever forget. The arrogant words. The billionaire wasn't subtle. He never was. As the waitress stood patiently, pen poised over her notepad, he leaned sideways toward his companions and began to speak in Arabic. Language, he assumed, would serve as his private shield. His words dripped with arrogance, each one meant to sting, each one designed to remind his friends of how far above everyone else he believed himself to be. "Look at her," he sneered, his lips curling with contempt. "Probably never seen this much wealth in her entire life, serving us while we dine like kings." The men at the table chuckled cruelly, their laughter echoing through the space, a sound that sliced through the calm ambiance of the restaurant. It was laughter that wasn't shared with her but against her. But the billionaire wasn't finished. He continued, lowering his voice just enough to make it seem like a secret, but loud enough for his friends to enjoy. Her accent when she said good evening. Did you hear it? Like she doesn't belong in a place like this. He smirked, lifting his glass of sparkling water and taking a slow sip, savoring both the drink and the humiliation he thought he had served. Imagine working every day carrying trays for men like us. That's the closest she'll ever come to luxury. The group roared again, shaking their heads in mock pity. One of them leaned in and muttered, also in Arabic, "She should be grateful we even let her stand at our table." That line sent another ripple of laughter around the group. To them, this was entertainment. They weren't just ordering dinner, they were feeding their egos, using her as the joke that made them feel superior. For the waitress, every laugh from that table was like a slap she couldn't defend herself from. She held her notepad firmly, pressing the pen a little too hard against the paper, though she hadn't written a word yet. She couldn't understand the exact sentences. But she didn't need a translation. She could read their eyes, their sneers, the way they looked at her as though she were beneath them. She had served hundreds of customers before, people from all walks of life. Some were kind, some indifferent, some difficult, but very few had dared to mock her so openly, right in front of her face, using a language barrier as their shield. What the billionaire and his friends didn't realize, though, was that she had lived in Dubai for years. She wasn't just a waitress who learned a few words to get by. She had spent nights studying, practicing and perfecting languages most people never thought she would know. English, French, Arabic, and even bits of Hindi, all flowing through her mind like different rivers feeding into one ocean. But at that moment she chose silence. She let them laugh. She let them believe they had succeeded in making her small. She let them sit comfortably in their arrogance, unaware that every word they spoke in Arabic was landing in her ears. With crystal clarity, the billionaire leaned back smugly, crossing his legs and adjusting his cufflinks as though he had just delivered the most brilliant joke of the evening. His friends nodded eagerly, egging him on. One of them whispered, "She probably saves for a whole month, just to afford the perfume you're wearing tonight." Another added, "Her whole year's salary might not even buy one of your shoes." The billionaire grinned, pleased with the chorus of cruelty around him. He tapped his watch, a luxury piece encrusted with diamonds, and said in Arabic, "This watch costs more than her entire life is worth." The laughter that followed was sharp and heartless, bouncing off the crystal glasses and fine china. The waitress, still standing there with her smile carefully fixed in place, felt the weight of every insult. But inside, something unexpected began to grow, not shame, not anger, but strength. She had endured hardships before. She had heard prejudice whispered behind her back. But this was different. They thought they were clever, safe, untouchable behind their language. What they didn't realize was that the same words meant to humiliate her were also setting the stage for their own downfall. Around the restaurant, other guests began to glance over, curious about the raucous laughter coming from the billionaire's table. Most couldn't understand what was being said, but they could sense the sharpness of it, the cruel enjoyment in their voices. The waitress noticed the glances too, and in her heart, She knew she had a choice: remain silent and let them believe their arrogance had no limits, or speak when the time was right and show them who she truly was. For now she allowed the silence. She nodded politely, pen still in hand as if nothing had touched her. But behind her calm eyes was a storm waiting to break. The billionaire thought he had delivered the perfect insult. His friends thought they were safe behind the barrier of Arabic. But they had no idea, because this young woman carried a secret, one that would turn their laughter into stunned silence. And when she revealed it, none of them would ever forget the lesson. The waitress strikes back. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, swirling his glass as if he were the king of the room. His friends still chuckled under their breath, replaying his insults in their minds, like children who had just heard a forbidden joke. He had no idea that the balance of power at his table was about to shift completely. When she finally stepped back, she did so with grace, not triumph. She wasn't trying to humiliate him. She had simply spoken the truth. And that truth carried more weight than all his money combined. That night, one thing became clear to everyone who saw it. Sometimes strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it speaks softly in perfect words at the perfect time. And in that moment, the waitress's voice was the strongest in the entire room. The billionaire's humiliation. The billionaire's face turned red. First a faint flush across his cheeks, then a deep shade of crimson that crept up to his ears. It was the kind of redness that came not from heat, but from the sting of shame. For a man who was used to commanding attention, controlling every room he entered, this was uncharted territory. For the first time in a very long time, he didn't have the power. His arrogance, once his armor, had turned into a trap, and the very person he believed he could belittle had risen far above him. The waitress, calm and unshaken, had stripped him of the one thing he valued more than wealth: control. At first, he tried to hold on to his composure. He adjusted his diamond cufflinks, tugged lightly at his tie, and gave a forced chuckle, as if the entire exchange had been a misunderstanding, a playful moment taken too seriously. It was just a joke, he mumbled weakly, half in Arabic, half in English. But even he could hear the hollowness in his voice. The words fell flat, carrying no weight, no conviction. His friends, those men who had laughed so loudly just moments before, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their eyes darted around the room, avoiding contact with him, avoiding the waitress, avoiding the curious stares of nearby diners. They fiddled with their silverware, straightened napkins, or stared down at their plates as if suddenly fascinated by the food they hadn't yet ordered. They knew, they all knew. What had begun as entertainment had turned into a humiliation that none of them could escape. And then it happened. From one of the nearby tables, a soft clap echoed through the quiet tension. Just two hands clapping slowly, deliberately. Heads turned, eyes widening. Another diner joined in, this time with a brighter, more confident clap. Within seconds, a small ripple of applause spread across that section of the restaurant. It wasn't a standing ovation, nor was it thunderous. It was quiet, respectful, but powerful. Some guests smiled warmly at the waitress, admiration clear in their eyes. One couple, seated close enough to hear every word of the exchange, gave her a proud nod, as if saying silently, "Well done. You spoke for all of us." The billionaire shrank under the weight of it. For a man used to applause directed at him during business conferences, charity galas, and award ceremonies, this was something he had never imagined. That people would applaud not him, but the woman he had tried to humiliate. He reached for his glass of water, hoping the simple act of drinking might steady him. But even his hand betrayed him. The glass trembled slightly as he lifted it, the reflection of the chandelier above quivering in the ripples of water inside. He cleared his throat, searching for words, but found none. His usual arsenal of charm, wit, and dominance was useless here. What argument could he make? What defense could he build? He had been caught, exposed, and bested in front of an audience he could no longer ignore. His friends remained silent, their loyalty suddenly fragile. None of them dared to laugh again. None dared to side with him. They understood that associating themselves with his cruelty now carried a cost. They had been willing participants in his mockery, and now they were unwilling participants in his disgrace. The waitress, meanwhile, stood tall. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She didn't even allow herself a satisfied grin. She simply continued with her duties, her professionalism intact, as though nothing unusual had happened. She refilled a glass, placed a napkin gently beside a plate, and asked calmly if the men were ready to order. But everyone in that room knew. She had already won. Every gesture she made carried dignity, the very quality the billionaire lacked. Her quiet strength outshone his wealth, and her measured composure only magnified his humiliation. For the billionaire, time seemed to crawl. Every second dragged as he sat there, burning under the weight of invisible eyes. He could feel the judgment of strangers who would later tell this story to friends. I saw a billionaire get humbled by a waitress, and she did it with nothing but words. He hated that thought. He hated the powerlessness of it. But most of all, he hated the truth in it. At last he leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table and covering his mouth with his hand, as if shielding himself from view. The arrogant smile he had worn so proudly earlier was gone. His posture had changed too. The man who once lounged like a king now sat hunched, small and diminished. The humiliation was complete. And though he would never admit it deep inside, a part of him knew. This night would haunt him for years to come. The waitress, meanwhile, walked away with her head held high, carrying something far more valuable than money, the respect of everyone who had witnessed the moment. The lesson we all need. Stories like this remind us of a powerful truth. Never underestimate anyone. The billionaire believed his money gave him the right to belittle others. He thought wealth was a weapon, a shield that placed him above everyone else. And more than that, he thought language was his secret tool, a barrier that would protect him from consequences. He assumed that by hiding insults behind Arabic, he could mock a woman without her ever realizing, but he was wrong. That evening, in front of his friends, in front of strangers, in front of the glittering chandeliers and polished marble floors, his arrogance was shattered by the very person he looked down upon, a waitress, a woman he considered powerless. Yet it was she who showed him the true meaning of power. Her strength didn't come from wealth. She didn't own luxury cars parked outside, or watches worth more than someone's yearly salary. She didn't need them. Her strength came from something far more lasting: dignity, intelligence, and self-respect. Think about it. She didn't scream. She didn't insult him back. She didn't lower herself to his level. All she did was stand tall, look him in the eyes, and use his own language to deliver a lesson he would never forget. And that's what made her victory so much greater. Because real power isn't loud. Real power doesn't need to show off. Real power can be quiet, calm, and steady like her words that silenced a room full of laughter. There's another lesson here too. How often do we as people judge others based on their appearance, their job, or where they come from? How often do we see a uniform and assume the person wearing it is simple, uneducated, or unimportant? The billionaire looked at the waitress and saw only her role: someone serving food, taking orders, clearing plates. To him, she was invisible beyond that uniform. But behind that uniform was a story he didn't know. Behind that face was intelligence, determination, and years of hard work. Behind her smile was the ability to speak not just one, but 4 languages fluently. And that's something we all need to remember. Behind every face is a story we cannot see. The other diners understood it. That's why they clapped. That's why they nodded at her proudly. They saw that respect wasn't tied to the size of your bank account, but to how you treat others. The billionaire left the restaurant quietly that night, his pride wounded, his arrogance exposed. He came in as the most powerful man in the room, but he left diminished, carrying the heavy weight of humiliation. His money couldn't protect him from the truth. His language couldn't shield him. For once he was forced to face himself, and maybe, just maybe, that was the first time in years he truly learned something valuable. The waitress, on the other hand, walked away differently. She didn't just walk away as an employee finishing her shift. She walked away as a symbol of dignity, admired by strangers, respected by all who saw the exchange. She carried something no billionaire could buy, no matter how many millions he had: the respect of every single person who witnessed her strength. And she also carried something else: proof that kindness and intelligence will always outshine arrogance and cruelty. This story is more than just an embarrassing moment for one man. It's a mirror reflecting something bigger. It reminds us that in our daily lives, we will encounter people from every background: workers, clerks, waiters, cleaners, drivers. And we always have a choice: treat them with kindness or treat them with contempt. The billionaire chose contempt and he was humbled. The waitress chose kindness, dignity, and confidence, and she walked away victorious. So the next time we're tempted to judge someone for their job, their clothes, their accent, or the color of their skin, let's remember this story, because the truth is simple. We don't know who we're talking to. We don't know their struggles, their intelligence, their hidden strengths. We don't know what they're capable of. Never underestimate anyone. At the end of the night, the restaurant returned to its normal rhythm. Plates clinked, soft music played, conversations resumed. But for those who had seen the moment, it lingered. It became a story they would carry, a story they would tell others. The billionaire might try to forget it, bury it beneath more wealth and noise, but deep down he would remember. He would remember the sting of being humbled by someone he thought beneath him. And perhaps in that memory a lesson would take root, that wealth can buy almost anything but never dignity, that arrogance is loud but respect is louder, and that sometimes the greatest lessons in life come from the most unexpected teachers. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you never miss more powerful stories like this.